Hey, Jean.
Sorry, I tried to get in at 6:30.
Oh, did you? I didn't notice. Hi, Liz.
I sent you a message. Is it tonight? It's just a senior moment.
Well, could still be following that full moon moment. How are you, Liz?
Fine. Yeah. A bit rushed, but yeah, fine. Yeah, I was wondering because, Jean, because generally when I put on the laptop, I try to put on a few minutes earlier and it just says waiting, and I thought maybe you're open or something. But anyway, you realized you were having a senior moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I can only see your eyes, Liz. I can't. Oh, that's better. That's it.
It's like that little thing we used to do when we were kids, isn't it? Kilroy, peeping over. Yeah.
You sent me a text, Susie, that came through on my home phone.
Oh, that's weird, isn't it?
Yes. Another friend sent one. Another friend sent one. So Tuesday, you're talking about Tuesday.
Hello. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. I'll talk to you later. Hi, Bridget.
That'd be good.
Hi, Dan. How are you today?
Hiya.
All right, thank you.
Hi.
Sorry. Right.
I'm already eating.
Is everybody on the hoof with dinner?
Yeah, I was a bit late today, and then
sorry.
yeah.
I don't know where that time. Jumping away. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Please do. How are you?
Really fine. Yeah. Busy day, but it's good. Gardening day. It's like one of those. Yesterday, I bought some plants for the back garden, which I'm putting in, and then the green thumb arrived to scarivate the garden, and then the guy who was being promised to me for weeks to come trim the trees came at the same time. So yesterday, it looked like I'd ordered in a whole garden appliance world, and there was no parking. And then the carers tried to park, and it was like, anyway, they all came back today and finished off. So I'm actually feeling like, but it's funny. Well, I mean, I have been out there a bit, but I haven't actually physically been doing it. But you feel like you're doing it, because you're trying to get them. But anyway, further on, gardening, all good.
Fresh air, sunshine.
Fresh air, yes, and a bit cooler today for it. Yeah, yesterday was pretty warm.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful yesterday.
The extremes of temperature. I've just been out for a walk and it's so cold. My ears were frozen off me.
It was 25 degrees here yesterday, but it's quite freak weather, for this time of year.
Yes, but what were we yesterday? Were we 25? I don't know.
21, my daughter said.
21.
Yeah. It's cooler today, but I mean it's cooler at night, obviously, but it's nice. But I think then it's only for a few days, and then it's going back to normal again. Don't get used to it.
Yeah,
yes.
no.
It's difficult because you want to think, oh gosh, can I go out without a coat? And then, it's not really 25. It's not like 25 in the summer. There's no real heat there, but somehow.
The wind went here because we've had very windy. So yesterday was sort of one of those really still days as well. So
very still. Yes, it was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Out walking, Jane?
I was delivering Easter bags for the lunch club from church that I help out at.
Lovely.
And then on Tuesday I was doing WI Easter bags.
Oh, busy girl.
Well, it's that time of the year, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of lonely people out there.
No.
Yeah.
Well, there is this year, because there's a lot of people still sitting Billy no mates,
Crazy, really. Yeah.
I've been out walking this morning with two ladies from the WI. We did 5.5 miles, but it was
very good.
Yes, yesterday, when I went out, I put the hat in my rucksack, but when I got out of the car, it soon went on my head.
Yeah.
Because it was so cold.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, Debbie, I know it's a football evening, so I'm not sure if she's back.
Yes, I'm not sure. I'll just leap out then and check if Anne's joining later or oops. Oh, that was silly of me. I've got Facebook now. Just ask her.
Well, after you that suggestion you gave to Anne about getting up early and going back to bed, well, this morning I did, because I woke up and I thought I'm not ready to get up, but I thought, oh, I'll put my pack on and get back into bed. What a great idea!
Oh, brilliant! How did it feel?
Well, I fell asleep and woke up. Thought, oh, that's nice.
Oh,
One job.
yeah, lovely.
I know. No, it was, yeah.
A bit more kip.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but no, it was. It felt less guilty than going back to bed later, so that was good.
Yeah, because you're actually doing something, because you'd have to lie down anyway. That's my plan for the morning.
No,
Yeah.
so no, but a lot of ladies were saying, you know, like it's trying to fit it in, but actually, I don't know, because I would normally wake quite early, but I thought, what a great idea! I can get it on and then just go back and lie down. So yeah,
I've got a pack on now.
Oh God, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
You can't see the bottom half of me.
you're looking rather large, Jean.
I spoke to someone this morning and they said, actually, I've got pajama bottoms on.
That's the new normal, but that's the new normal.
Yes, apparently it is.
Yeah, when yeah, it's I think that's them and everybody else, because if you're sitting at home and if you're working, maybe you know, you can only see your top half, and then yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Well, she's not around at the minute to say hi. So let's see. Maybe she's on the phone. Okay. Oh, I'm back to the wrong window. Sorry. Here we go.
No, thank you.
Well, in that case, any questions ahead of tonight, because it's about balancing hormones and libido.
Right. Yes, well, as you know, I've had a hormone problem challenge for quite a few years. We're getting balanced out. Taking the grains out for me has been brilliant. Not easy, but it's nice.
So you don't eat any grains at all?
No, not at the moment. Susie said, I've had an adrenal challenge. I've had it for years. And Susie suggested I took grains out, and within a week, it was just, well, really overnight. So, yes.
Your body knew that there wasn't going to get any, and they just decided, right, okay.
It's really
well,
good.
It's a tough one, really, isn't it, to take out?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is.
When
Yes,
you look, yes.
Yeah.
But you've got to look at what you can eat, not what you can't eat.
Yeah, I mean, that is it. There's such a bounty that you can, that's it, not limited.
You know, don't complain about what you can't have. Look at, you know, be positive and look at what you can have.
Properly. Yeah.
But I think also, Jean, because it is, well, I guess it's when it's in a household, it is a slightly harder, like that lady said last night.
I live on my own. So
yeah,
I can do what I like.
Brilliant. You know, that's the thing. It is. It's. I mean, I suppose we just have to be stronger and say, right, well, but it's especially if you're involved in cooking for them. You sort of think, well, is it fair to take it out altogether for them too? But
yeah, but that don't mean it's going to work for you just because it's worked for me.
No, but I would think it is. You know, we depend on it way too much. I think, you know, because that's the way. Well, definitely, I don't know how you feel, Liz, but.
But are you celiac, Jean?
Well, I am. I do go gluten-free,
right?
But I'm not diagnosed as a celiac. But Susie suggested, well, quite at the beginning, that I went because I had an underactive thyroid, which I've got working through Susie.
Yeah.
you know, you've turned round so many of my
Yeah.
health issues over the years. And when she suggested it, I couldn't, with what else was going on in my life, I couldn't cope with it. Well, I can't do that. And then, you know, a few years later, I decided I'd give it up. And yes, an improvement there. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of Irish people are celiac, so obviously it's somehow in the genes, you know. But whether it gets worse with age or you know, this I don't know. But I mean, I'm not, but I think cutting down on wheat and grains is probably, like you said, a good thing because we all eat way too much, I think.
Yes.
It goes back to the potato famine, actually.
It does. It goes back to the famine.
Yes.
A lot of things are.
Yeah, because it had an enormous effect in creating a very tubercular picture in the Irish. And celiacs is sort of a descendant of a tubercular picture.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because people were so malnourished, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. It set a calcium misplacement picture up in the body. Yeah.
Well, that's strange, Susie, because some of my ancestors were Irish from Southern Ireland.
Oh, right.
Yes.
But
Yes,
it just,
no,
I mean, I'm not basing that on any scientific evidence. I just read it. My aunt is one, but it's somehow in the genes, you know, but whether it's hereditary or whether it's to do with the diet, I don't know, because people, if they were just eating potatoes or, you know, it's very carbohydrate, isn't it?
It is,
you know,
it
and
is.
maybe then they ate bread, and people probably still eat too much bread in Ireland, you know, and what do I know, you know, but it seems to be quite prevalent. I mean, when I was at school, the amount of people in the class that were celiac, it was like a diabetic, do you know what I mean? It was nothing, and then you never heard of it, you know, again.
All right.
No, that's really interesting. Which bit of Ireland are you
Limerick,
from?
Limerick,
Right.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And that wouldn't have been people on faddy diets, you know what I mean, or going to any nutrition, but they were obviously being diagnosed as celiac. So obviously it was considered serious enough to be gluten free, even in those days. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's it's something that years ago when I trained, we were taught to look out for and to ask if there was any Irish in the background.
Really? Yeah.
Gosh, yes, always. Yes. And I mean, sometimes it's obvious because people have an Irish accent, but
yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, yeah.
But we're always taught to ask if there's any Irish in the prior generations, and it's because there is a big tubercular miasm from the malnourishment at that time. And apparently people were eating lime off the walls because they didn't have enough calcium in the body. And no food.
No food.
Yeah.
No.
But it's interesting that it's gone into the genes, the DNA, you know, because you would think, well, that's them, you know, they didn't have enough food, but you think the next generation would be.
But you think about the sort of impact something like that would have on reproduction is enormous.
Well, they must have been not deformed children, but now malnourished children, so already weak, you know, because people had rickets and things like that. You know, they would have been malnourished babies, like you get out in Africa now, you know, that are underweight and the whole lot, but somehow they were hard, so they survived, you know, they were hard.
It's amazing, isn't it, really? It's incredible what the human being
was there a tuberculosis then, you know, in probably the 1960s or 50s. Because we had a really bad time. My dad got tuberculosis and was and probably did he recover really, but it was a big thing in the area at the time. And did the same thing happen in England? Did we have another bout of tuberculosis, or were people vaccinated by then? Do you know, Susan?
I must admit,
In
What,
the
what
late
sort of
40s
time period was that?
In the late 40s, my dad's sister had TB. She was in the hospital in Seacroft here in Leeds.
Yeah, but did we have another like TB hospital? Because they had set them up in Ireland because it was so.
Yes, there was definitely
bad.
one in Limerick.
Yeah.
It was called the City Home. And I remember, I mean, hearing stories about it and the amount of people that had
Or maybe it was the 40s, but I think it was maybe, yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I don't know, but I heard stories about it, about people getting TB. It was
Yeah,
something I remember in my childhood, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, it was always there, like TB, and there were some like homes and people went to for
Sanatoriums.
TB.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
obviously there was a
So do you think, Jean, it was here too then? So when did we get that? Well, probably a
Well,
vaccine.
Yeah, it's my auntie. She had it in. Well, she came out in the sanatorium in 1949, and the council gave her a new council house, which she lived in for the rest of her life, and her parents moved in with her. And I know, you know, she moved in there a year after I was born. So,
Right.
you know, I remember that, you know, because I was told, well, they moved here in 1949. Because I used to go and visit my grandparents and my aunties that were living there.
All right.
But how long she was in the
Sorry.
hospital for, I don't know.
Was it an actual sanatorium, do you think, Jean?
I don't. Well, they had all the beds out on the veranda
Outside. Yes,
yeah,
that's
get
it.
the fresh air. So
Yeah, like we
yeah.
were talking about last week.
Yes.
yeah, with the light therapy, yes, that's the
Mm.
vision I had of the City Home in Limerick, where you know there was rows of beds and they put people outside to try and they were often in the countryside, you
Yeah.
know,
Yes,
away, so that yeah.
Mm.
But
But there
obviously
is-
poor people just died, you know, I mean, forget
Yes.
them, but you
Yeah.
know, rich people, I suppose, could go to a sanitarium.
Yeah, I must admit, I don't know how they were funded or anything like that.
Yeah, I think at that point, by the 60s, there was public funding, but you can
Right.
imagine, I mean, I hear stories back in the 30s and 40s, you know, I mean, that wasn't public funded, certainly not in Ireland, you know.
No.
So I
No.
think, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the difficulty is that with the vaccine, it's been pushed elsewhere in the body.
That's
So
it.
that's why you see things like celiacs, like autoimmune disease with thyroid, that kind of thing.
Really?
Yeah, but
Well,
of
we
course
all
there's
back-
still a gluten connection with the thyroid because that's what's creating the autoimmune reaction.
Well, we all had the vaccine, you know,
Yeah, I'm sure I had the vaccine. I mean, I can't remember, but we had when we were about 12, maybe or something, but I
Yeah.
honestly can't remember.
got the mark on your arm. Like
Yes, yeah, I can't really remember, but you know, we certainly had a few things, but I suppose they had to get rid of it because people were dying. I don't know, but I never thought about it being pushed somewhere else. Because it was a lung disease. I mean, it was a lung disease, and if you're saying it came from the famine, that it was a tubercular thing, so it's something to do with the lungs. But I didn't link the thyroid with the lungs. I thought that was more
No, well, it's not that. It's the impact that, because the calcium misplacement gets pushed elsewhere.
Okay.
And
so
if
for one or another person, it'd be somewhere else. Is that what you're
that's
saying?
right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that would depend on their familial background. Yeah.
I can remember still in the 70s, we still had x-rays every 2 years to see whether we had TB. I can't remember when it stopped.
Right.
But we used to have an x-ray. I can remember going when we were on holiday in Filey. And that would be in the early 70s, I think.
I'm sure we got an X-ray as a child, now that you mention it, because I mean, we wouldn't have been going to the doctor. You'd have paid to go to the doctor, so basically you wouldn't have been going very often. But I'm sure we used to go kind of to it was called the dispensary. It was basically the free doctor, and you had to queue and go to a big place. You know, I can still remember it. And I'm sure we had an X-ray then, and it was like everyone got X-rayed to see, did you have something on your lungs?
No, I'll skip that one.
Fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
That's why we're learning so much from you, Susie.
Man's inhumanity to man. It's appalling. Well, and creatures.
Yeah.
Yes. But moving on. We'll grab the oops, if I can find it. There we are.
My video because I'm low.
You're low on battery, Liz.
No, I'm not battery, but I think I've got a low connection, so I'm just going to turn off for a while.
Okay. So
Oh no, I haven't done that.
Oh, come on, wake up. Not you, sorry, the slideshow.
I will.
Right. So we're going to have a look at what is needed for the hormones and thereby libido. So I'm not necessarily going to look at your glands like adrenal and thyroid today, but that's a very interesting one, because that's maybe something that I ought to include somewhere else. So food for thought, Jean, thank you.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, obviously we've spoken about adrenals a lot because of stress, but so looking at pre and post menopause, really the time of menopause is the time of your last period. And so pre-menopause, the periods can still be regular, but some symptoms appearing for some people, perhaps like sweating or similar. And so when the body's in perimenopause and the ovary function is going down, then the periods can become irregular. But that's not necessarily the case for everybody. Sometimes they can become lighter, sometimes they can become much heavier towards the end, and sometimes they can just stop very suddenly, and that's it. And you know, every woman is different, and so postmenopause, final period and beyond, the average age in the UK is 51 years. And actually in Japan and China, it's slightly younger. And it used to be that periods started later as well. But of course, because of all the sort of hormonal interference with water and plastics that have got into the water, and diet as well, girls are tending to start their periods much earlier, but the average age in Victorian times, I think, was 17. And so they do say that there is a connection between the length of time that you have cycles and things like breast cancer. So what are the factors for sort of contributing to an early or a late finish? Smoking can diminish the secretion of estrogen, which means that the periods will finish earlier. If someone has a hysterectomy, of course, that completely changes the blood flow to that area of the body, to the pelvis. And that may, if their ovaries are left and not taken as well, which you always hope is the case, because then they can still keep producing some hormones, then you tend to get an acceleration of early menopause, because the blood supply to the ovaries goes down as well. And of course, sterilisation, the same thing, unfortunately, less blood flow to the ovaries. So finishing later, weight gain can produce a later finish because the fat cells themselves produce hormones, and one of those can be estrogen. And also where women have fibroids. Now, I had a tutor who used to call a fibroid a second liver. And the reason for that is because it's your liver that breaks down your excess estrogens that your body doesn't need. And unfortunately, if that process is inefficient, if the liver isn't, breaking them down very efficiently, because maybe somebody's really dehydrated, and their liver detoxification pathways are inefficient. Could be, the diet's very high in sugar, which is very drying, very stressed, which is very drying. Then what happens then is that the estrogen is what, excess estrogens are what causes fibroids to grow in the womb. And that's sort of, the reason she used to call it a second liver is because it takes the pressure off the liver. It's a way of not having to, filter out and get rid of those excess estrogens. So then symptoms of menopause or aging is what we're often, this is the question, because there's, the changes I've listed on the left are frequently blamed on the menopause. So hot flushes and night sweats, changes in sleep, irritability, declining libido, osteoporosis, weight gain, and vaginal dryness. Now, if we look at the right-hand side, there are symptoms of aging, if you like. There are other symptoms that are associated with menopause that may also be associated with menopause or aging. And so aging skin, headaches, mood swings, depression, anxiety. So often people seem to have a much lower mood at the time of the menopause, and very often it's blamed on that. So lack of energy and joint pains, and changes in hair loss and hair quality. And so the thing is that some of those changes can be due to aging, and particularly if the body isn't well nourished. And so things like irritability, libido declining, weight gain can be due to things like high cortisol because of stress, skin aging equally due to stress hormones, rather than necessarily changing menopause hormones, depression and anxiety. Now, what's really interesting is that the other thing that's happening at the time of the menopause is that we're losing the route of elimination that is our period. And that blood loss every month is a route out of which we can dump waste. So we're really lucky to have periods all those years, in a way. And some women throughout their life use that route of elimination quite heavily. And so if you can imagine, once you lose that, if you have been using that route of elimination quite heavily, that's going to put a lot more pressure on the liver, a lot more pressure on the kidneys, a lot more pressure on the skin as a route of elimination. It can, because it's had an impact on the liver, it can make us more grumpy. Like we say, grumpy old women and grumpy old men. not quite sure what their excuse is, are you? And then you've got, we've mentioned weight gain with the hormones. Declining libido. Libido can be affected by menopause, but it doesn't have to be. And then thinking about depression, again connected with irritability and liver, and anxiety, and also more stress, more pressure placed on the lungs to excrete waste when we lose the menstrual cycle. And then anxiety, again, more pressure on the kidneys. And that impact on the kidneys can then, because the hair is an external manifestation of the kidneys, have an impact on changes in hair quality and also hair loss. And I can remember saying to my hairdressers a few years ago, do you think my hair's got more coarse now I'm older? She said, Susie, she said, you've always had coarse hair. Oh, okay. So then, again, if we compare symptoms of the menopause with symptoms of premenstrual tension, if the hormones are starting to fluctuate a bit, as they can do around the menopause, it can create a sort of situation of premenstrual tension. And so all of these that I've listed can be associated with that as well. And so, yeah, it's amazing what can be written off. And I've been fascinated to read a book. Oh goodness me, I can't remember what the title of it was now. But it looked at all the ways in which men and women are treated differently in society. And the chapter that fascinated me the most was the one about drug research, because basically what happened from very early on with drug research is that they stopped using women as guinea pigs for drugs. And the reason for that was that because women have a menstrual cycle, they are, of course, not reliable test subjects for a drug because they give very varying results. And so if you can imagine, they just shut women out of drug testing. And this is the reason that thalidomide was able to happen, because those drugs were tested on men. That drug was tested on men, had no apparent side effects, and was given to the women for nausea in pregnancy, and of course created the horrible side effects that it did. And it wasn't, only until probably the last couple of decades that they've actually started regularly including women in drug trials, because they need to know how differently drugs react in women. And so things like cholesterol drugs and blood pressure drugs, heart drugs, can work completely differently in women than they do in men. So when hormones are declining, it's very true to say that, and this is interesting, in relation to what Jean was saying at the beginning, which is that our estrogen, progesterone and testosterone do get far bigger press and notice than adrenaline and cortisol. But having said that, they can be less likely to adversely affect the health, because after menopause, your hormones return to pre-adolescent levels. Although you do carry on producing some of them from the ovaries for about 15 years afterwards, and some from the adrenals, but it's much, much lower and gradually declining. And so they are far less likely to affect health after menopause. But adrenaline and cortisol, your stress hormones, can have huge effects. And so as your ovaries decrease production slowly of your sex hormones, the adrenals take over producing the estrogen, progesterone and testosterone, and the building block which comes before them, which is DHEA, and you might have heard of that one. But if your adrenals are busy producing adrenaline and cortisol because you're very stressed, or because your blood sugar metabolism is poorly managed, or because you're very dehydrated and that's setting up an internal stress which is contributing to the adrenal hormone production. When you've got overproduction of cortisol, your hormones go out of balance. So normally at 4 p.m. you get a natural cortisol peak, and it tends to be that 4 o'clock in the afternoon is almost like the premenstrual syndrome stage of the menstrual cycle. So you can feel at that point, and you know, so many in France, they call it the 4 heures, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You sit down and you have a cup of tea or coffee and a nice big French gâteau. And there's that craving for those things because they contribute. You know, if your cortisol is in overproduction and your blood sugar's going like this, then that is actually a better time to take a bit of exercise, have a snooze, meditate, and get in touch with it inside, and try and avoid reaching for any sugar or caffeine. So what about disturbed sleep? Now, about 80% of your serotonin is produced by your gut flora, and serotonin is a serenity hormone, what is a neurotransmitter actually, that helps sleep. And to make it, you need the tryptophan amino acid and some of your B vitamins, so B5, B6, B9, B12 and choline. And what they've found is that naturally after menopause, because there's different sets of hormones and balance of hormones around, then you get a gut flora change. So where they were producing 80+% of your hormones, your serotonin, that helps you sleep because it helps you to make melatonin, because it's a precursor to melatonin, then you've got difficulty, there sort of inherently with sleep. So what happens is that if you've got magnesium there, you can relax the muscles and you can push calcium into the right place to calm the central nervous system. Good sources of protein coming in the evening, with maybe some nice B vitamins during the day, possibly a bit of supplementation, but thinking about also if you're going to have grains, that they're whole grains, things like nuts and seeds are a lovely source, and things like eggs and chicken and fish can be good sources of tryptophan. And so vitamin D, as we've said before, supports magnesium's role with calcium, pushing calcium into the right place. And omega-3 helps you calm down too much stress hormone imbalance by helping you regulate blood sugar, because the fat's digested more slowly, leaves the stomach more slowly, and also gives you the right receptor shape for your serenity neurotransmitter to dock into your gut and into your brain and help sleep. And the ideal is that we don't get too much of this kind of light late at night. And so try and switch it off 2 to 4 hours before you're going to go to sleep. Or you can get blue blocking glasses, switch the phone off in the evening, and the laptop and the iPad and all that. Because the other thing is as well that once you actually go to bed, your melatonin production comes up when you've got full darkness. So bumbling around with kind of low lamps of an evening can be very helpful. And making sure that your bedroom is as dark as possible. If you've got a street light outside, that you use blinds to block that as much as possible, as well as the curtains, and keep all of that out. And then you can produce the melatonin more effectively. And get any electromagnetic frequencies switched off, as you know, like the Wi-Fi, the TV. These smart TVs can give off quite a lot of EMFs, quite a surprising amount of their own, just on their own, even when the Wi-Fi is off. And so all of those will disrupt your sleep hormones and neurotransmitters. So if there's any hot flushes or night sweats, drinking at least 4 pints of water daily is really helpful. Cutting down, I've put cutting down stimulants like tea, coffee, alcohol, but actually the best thing to do if you can is cut them out because they will hold that sweat mechanism there, because they're going to have an impact on blood sugar, and blood sugar fluctuation is actually something that can make us sweat anyway. So if you do have night sweats, to sort of monitor whether you wake sweating, which means it's your hormones that are the issue, or whether you wake and then you start to sweat, which means that blood sugar is the issue. And so vitamin C and vitamin E can be really helpful, and all your foods that are high in bioflavonoids, so anything that is rich in colour, is really, really helpful. So what's the liver doing at the menopause? Ideally, it's able to process these excess estrogens that we don't need and break it down and remove them from the blood. But also, it's filtering our blood and secreting bile. It's optimizing our thyroid function, converting our T4 to T3 for us. It's converting sugar to glycogen, which can be stored and then unpacked, ready to give us energy if needed or go to other cells. It helps us break down fat to make energy. And if there's alcohol in moderation, then the liver alcohol in moderation allows the liver to function efficiently after loss of menstruation, because it's thinking about it being, you know, you've lost that route of elimination. And so if you bring alcohol consumption down, your liver will be able to cope better, because your liver is no longer able to dump acid wastes out through that route of elimination. And that is one of the reasons why, you know, people sweat, because the blood that is being cleaned by the liver travels down to the kidneys. Your kidneys can be like a kettle boiling dry if you haven't got enough water. So if we're drinking our 4 pints of water and water is coming in from food, then we'll be doing very nicely. But anytime then we put a diuretic in, we're going to create a situation where we start to drop the liver's ability to process those chemicals that have been broken down from caffeine, from alcohol, from drugs, from whatever else is coming in that's very acid forming. And that means it's much harder for the liver to eliminate its wastes. So that puts more stress on your kidneys. And so one of the ways, I said yesterday evening as well, is that your liver dumps wastes out through the blood is by heat. It heats the blood, and then you get warm, and your blood throws that wastes out through the skin. But libido, really, you're back to cholesterol again. And I know we've talked a lot about cholesterol in the last several weeks, because there is a real myth, certainly about cholesterol, high cholesterol, being a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. It's a myth that dietary cholesterol is a risk for cardiovascular disease. Only about 25% of your cholesterol comes from your diet. The liver makes the other 75%. And your brain and nervous system are largely made of cholesterol. It's a huge amount. And also, you need cholesterol to help you make your vitamin D, and you need cholesterol to help you make your steroid hormones. And on that list are your sex hormones. And so if your cholesterol is low, and you can't manufacture enough hormones to keep that system running efficiently, it's your sex hormones that are going to be the first to go. And so then without those, we have low testosterone, particularly, and testosterone is something that can contribute to low sex drive and depression. And coming back I'll just whisk back. With the arrow on. So if you can imagine, when you've got your cholesterol going to make stress hormones because you've got blood sugar issues or because you're very stressed, then there isn't going to be a lot there for the libido. So one thing that can be really helpful is to make sure that there's enough vitamin D. So the optimal level, sorry, I meant to put a picture of the sunshine on there. The optimal way to do that is, for the 6 months of the year that we have optimal sunshine, to get out there and get in it as much as you can, because vitamin D helps prevent anxiety and depression. And basically, both of those are libido stiflers. Just a look at vaginal dryness and discomfort. Now, unfortunately, estrogen levels are one of those things that maintain the strength of the vaginal walls, and so they can become thinner. The blood flow becomes more restricted, and that can contribute to less lubrication. There is a factor also that if we don't use it, we lose it, because this doesn't sound too, what's the word? Base, or it's a little bit like saying it about muscles. It's very well saying it about muscles, but quite another thing saying it about the vagina. But of course, that is a set of muscles as well. But if you can imagine, you stimulate blood flow to the vagina when it's used, which stimulates all of the lubrication that it needs, and also the walls lining the bladder and urethra can shrink and become thinner and drier. So the really important thing to look at is how you're going to keep that extra hydration. And linseed tea and soaked linseeds, soak in your grains, soak in your nuts, can all contribute to increasing hydration, keeping the amount of vegetables and fruit that are coming into the diet very high. And the great thing about keeping a high intake of veggies and fruit is with all those colours, you also increase your fat-soluble antioxidants, A, D and E, and they have a contribution to play with vaginal moisture. And so also thinking about maybe supplementing with omega-7, which is found in sea buckthorn oil. And the kind of dryness that can come, with aging as well can also affect the eyes. So some people get very dry eyes as well. It's thinking about all of your mucous membranes. So omega-7 can impact the lining of the gut, the lining of the vagina, the lining of your eye membranes, and help with the moistness of the eyes. Basically, every single organ in your body sits in a bath of oil. And so also it can be useful to look at the kind of phytoestrogen rich foods, such as are very high in the diet in Japan. So they don't particularly have a word for menopause like we do. And so a diet high in your unsaturated fats is helpful, your omega-3 and some of your omega-6, avoiding dairy and foods high in phytoestrogens. And so things like tofu, miso, tamarai, shoyu, tempeh, natto, and maybe good quality soy milk, but it would have to be that which is not GM, and only, that is only water and soybeans. And the only one I've seen has been a French one, which actually Ocado sell, and it's in a green packet, and I just can't think of the name of it at the moment. But things like a bit of tofu, miso is a nice one to bring in, and tamarai or shoyu. They're both wheat-free soy sauces. Other foods that are rich in phytoestrogens are things like your beans and pulses, and all the better if you sprout them. And so things like your mung beans, your ajuki beans are fabulous for women. Whole grains are good, and also seeds are naturally rich in phytoestrogens as well. And then you've got a small collection of veggies and fruit. You've got your celery, which we've been mentioning more recently as a fab food, broccoli, and garlic. And then you've got the fruits, apples, plums, and cherries. And cherries actually are there's a particular type of cherry. I think it's the Montmorency cherry, is high in serotonin, and so can help sleep, as can kiwis. They're naturally high in serotonin as well. So herbs and spices, you've got cinnamon, which also helps greatly to balance blood sugar through the day. Sage, red clover, hops, fennel, and parsley. And again, I apologise, I haven't personally, used red clover, so I don't like to say, oh yes, take it. It's not something I've used in practice. But things like fennel, parsley, cinnamon, sage, put all those on your food, fabulous, or use them in your cooking, really lovely. So one of the things to look at is, as well, for reducing aging, is looking at the biochemistry of pleasure, because it's quite fascinating. So you've got cells in your brain your blood cells and your blood vessel cells and your lung cells all produce something called nitric oxide. And this, you might be familiar with nitrous oxide, which can make people giggle. Now, the production of nitric oxide is produced by things that give you pleasure. So laughter, orgasm, experiences that you find pleasurable, say dancing or exercise, the runner's high that, you know, people get when they're exercising is from nitric oxide. Meditation can produce nitric oxide. Eating fruit and veg, fruit and veg are fabulous for increasing nitric oxide, and especially as well, to add to that, foods high in antioxidants, because then you've got foods high, veggies high in nitrates, and food that some of them are high in antioxidants as well. Then you can make your nitric oxide. So what happens when you make the nitric oxide? Well, it's a gas release that lasts for a few seconds at a time, but it triggers a chain reaction of feel-good chemicals. So, you know, just watching a 10-minute funny skit of some sort and giving yourself a good giggle if you're feeling a bit flat, or ringing a friend that you know has got a really good sense of humour and have a good giggle with them about something, can be really helpful, because you trigger that chain reaction of feel-good chemicals, which causes an energy lift and a sense of relaxation, which is real because your blood vessel walls widen because they're relaxing, and that increases the blood flow to all of your body. So that is one of the really important roles of nitric oxide. It also helps anticoagulation in your blood, which means that you're preventing strokes. It signals your white blood cells to fight infection and destroy tumours. So this is why, again, you know, if you're trying to heal from something chronic, laughter is so important, or pleasure experiences. And we'll get much more pleasure out of an experience than a thing, for example. It balances your neurotransmitter levels, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. So your serotonin and dopamine and so on. It reduces the inflammation at a cellular level. So you've then got soft, wide, flexible blood vessels. And that is a really good situation, because during the aging process, blood vessels can start to harden, but you really would, you know, need those to be lovely and flexible. So that way you improve circulation, and because you've got improved circulation everywhere, your body functions better. So then you're avoiding serious illness and disease, because the blood flow to your body and the oxygenation to your body is so much better. So there's a researcher called Herbert Benson, and he talks about nitric oxide being associated, or being a crucial element in what is known as the peak experience of ecstatic flow. And this is where something like meditation is really lovely, because you can get that feeling of just being connected spiritually, because, and again, so relaxed. And it causes new neural pathways to be made in the brain, which is great, because that's that neuroplasticity, that flexibility in your nervous system that you need, those new neural pathways. So those information pathways that are being created can form new habits of mind, completely change the dynamics of human belief, contribute to your creative process and your spiritual experience of being here. But what depletes it? So anger, grief and fear deplete nitric oxide. And then if you've got the endothelial lining in your blood vessels damaged by stress and physical toxins, and it's becoming much stiffer, those blood vessels will struggle to release nitric oxide to reduce the free radical damage to your body. And the other thing to think about with sex hormones, again, which I've mentioned already, but emphasized here in red, if you're using cholesterol to make those stress hormones associated with anger, grief and fear, there's not much left for libido. So the ageless, healthy goddess could do well to release grief and resentment, and feel righteous anger when appropriate. You know, if a member of your family is under pressure or being attacked by someone, or you're protecting an animal from, you know, something, all sorts of reasons why we might feel a bit of anger. But it's thinking about having some wing women with whom we can giggle, dance, exercise, go for walks in the fresh air and sunshine. Anything else you might love to do. And see if you can get in a sense of feeling joy and compassion, because it's that feeling of joy and compassion and pleasure of being in company, enjoying what you're doing. All of those things produce nitric oxide. And that really fascinated me when I read it, because I was thinking, oh wow, you know, that's why I feel so good when I dance or something like that. And so, because I really love dancing, so it feels good. And then I'll produce the nitric oxide. So when we produce nitric oxide, what happens is that it is like the uber neurotransmitter of all your other neurotransmitters. So it helps balance your endorphins, your feel-good neurotransmitters, dopamine for get up and go and motivation, serotonin for serenity and well-being, oxytocin, which is also produced during breastfeeding, and also orgasm, and also when you're doing something pleasurable and you're connecting with others. And also DMT is produced, which is come from the pineal and is connected with dreaming. And so then when your cells throughout your body are producing, you know, blood vessels and your lung cells and your blood cells and your brain cells, nervous system, you're producing this and receiving nitric oxygen. That is what hopefully creates the agelessness that we all desire, to keep us energetic and healthy as we get older. So what's high in nitrates? Well, garlic is lovely, spinach, bok choy, arugula, all your green veggies really, but these particularly. Celery, it's just such a wonder food is celery. Cress, chervil, lettuce, beetroot. And the lovely thing about nitric oxide is that it helps stabilize your blood sugar, because it also helps regulate insulin. And you could almost relate that to something that Louise Hay says in her book Heal Your Life, which is when you are in a joyful state, you would be less likely to be subject to something like diabetes, because you have joy flowing through your veins and your arteries, because really she sees diabetes as being a lack of joy flowing through. And so and circulatory disorders, but so diabetes is sort of related to the disappointment. And so then nuts and seeds are great because they're high in arginine, which is an amino acid that is helpful for making nitric oxide as well. Any questions?
I'd nodded off, Susie.
Oh, we've been for a long walk today.
Yeah.
I must have a very soporific voice.
Oh no, gorgeous. Well, it's very much food for thought.
I better record some bedtime stories.
Lovely. Yes, wouldn't mind that at all. Actually, it'd be good. You know, when you're getting back to the vitamin D and exposure those 6 months, how much of our bodies do we need out? I can't remember. Do we like? Is it
All of it, as I
All
understand.
of it, yes.
You know, there's some nice days, but we still wear our coats and stuff. You know, we're out there, but are we? I know it's better to be out there than not, but
yes, I mean, even if this part of your body is exposed.
All right, so it's not. Because I thought that you have to have the arms out, and I'm thinking, oh my god, some days.
Well, it's like
more surface area.
Yesterday and the day before, I hopped out in the garden, got a rug, 20 minutes, 10 minutes each side. Well, underwear actually, not nothing, but but my husband always says to me, he says, you've got loads of bikinis. Why don't you put one on? Why do you go out? You know, and just lay there in your underwear. It's like, well, I don't care. You know, I'm not seaside or anything.
It looks like a bikini, doesn't it?
Yes, I often do try and coordinate a little bit. Not always, but some of the time. And so it's sort of as soon as it's warm enough, I'm out there 20 minutes at least, and usually 30 if I can, but it was only 20. So I was too busy.
But actually, I have been to a doctor for my back and the whole lot. He's an orthopedic, and he said you could lie by a window if you had a big window, and you know, that the sun comes in with no clothes on, or practically no clothes on, and then just do what you've done, you know, 10 minutes and then turn the other way. And he said that would also give you vitamin D.
Yes, I have heard that before, but I've never seen anything that kind of proves it. But
I don't know. I suppose it's better than nothing, you know.
Yes,
but,
absolutely. And the lovely thing about being the other side of a window is it is kind of bit green, more greenhousey.
Yeah.
And you do get, you know, the effects of the light.
So does that vitamin D come through the glass then, Susie?
Well, it's not that, it's the light striking.
The light, I guess, is
helps you make it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I understood it. Is that the light? It's the lack of exposure to light. I mean, I'm not any kind of an expert, but it's
because
because the Scandinavians do light therapy, don't they? You know, you hear about light therapy, and it's meant to lift your mood. So I don't know, it could be all rubbish, but
no, not at all.
They always say, oh, houses, you know, modern houses, more big windows, you know, whereas in the past it was smaller windows, and now people say, oh yeah, there's such big windows, so much light. You know, every time you watch one of these programs about, I don't watch them now, but about decoration or buying houses, oh, there's so much light. You know, it seems to be a very
hot
thing.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? Yes, like wall-to-wall windows right across the side of a house.
Can I ask you a question? Just at the earlier part, it's only for my interest, you were talking about the menopause, and did I understand from you, you were better if you started your periods later and finished them earlier, or whether you had this whole thing was longer?
Yes, the research I've read, actually it was in the China study, indicated that Japanese women had much shorter length of time when they were actually menstruating. So they start later than us and they finish earlier, and that they have much less tendency to breast cancer. But I think there's actually other reasons for that. That it's because there is no dairy at all, really, in their traditional diet. And dairy is a food that can contribute to breast cancer.
Okay.
So I think it's one of those things where it's difficult to say whether it's the menstruation or whether it's something dietary that's different.
I had heard before, that people that had, I mean, it's too late for me now, and it makes no odds. But that had maybe had a child later, and then their periods kept going longer. That somehow their bodies were healthier and more lubricated, because you read, like, when you have the menopause, you're a dried up prune.
Yes, that is a fairly common term, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, that's why I'm surprised you were sort of seeing it as a positive, when you have this image of, the minute you have the menopause, your skin starts to dry up and you're a dried up prune, you have no estrogen, whatever, and it's all finished, yeah.
I think it's really interesting that a pregnancy does lengthen the length of time of your cycle.
Right, yeah.
Because you're not ovulating the eggs that you would be ovulating during those 9 months. And then after breastfeeding, it can take a bit of time for the ovulation to kick in again.
Yeah.
And so you kind of gain monthly cycles, as it were. And you can tend to find that, say, a woman that's had 3 or 4 children will go for longer because of that than somebody that's had 1 or 2. So age isn't kind of the relationship, it's almost the length of time that you're actually menstruating.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And kind of deducting any pregnancies from that.
Okay.
But I think it's a lot more noticeable with the younger generation now, that they're starting as early as 9.
I had also read this.
So that really is way too early from a health perspective.
So what causes that then, Susie?
Usually because there's more estrogens in the water now. Sugar is a big factor, and the wrong kind of fats in the diet are contributing to an earlier onset of the
because I thought, I mean, it was interesting what you said about in Victorian times that girls were started later. I never heard that, but I kind of, again, it's maybe a myth that people started later and finished early, maybe because they were malnourished and their bodies were not functioning enough, that you were malnourished and then your period stopped because your body couldn't keep going, because they say, I got really sick and my period stopped. And it's almost like, oh God, your body stopped functioning, because as a woman, it should have regular periods. Is that a myth or?
Well, no, not at all. And certainly women that are dieting very severely, or that have anorexia or anorexia. No, absolutely, the periods can just cease because there isn't enough nutrients to continue them. So it's really thinking that that may have been the case with some teens, say in Victorian times. I'm quite sure that there were people malnourished. But at the same time, the essential fat profile then was better than it is now. And less preservatives and less
Yeah. Yeah.
of all the old rubbish, you know.
Yeah.
Lower
Because
sugar levels.
it's always seen as a negative not to have periods for women.
Yeah.
That was always kind of my understanding. You were a dried up prune or you were sick, you know. So as if you when you stopped having periods, as your body was then giving up, you know.
Yes, and it's almost thinking about it as though, you know, when you're in your teens, you're not a dried up prune, but yet the hormones are, you know, they decline to a similar level than they are when you're in your teens.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously teenagers aren't dried up prunes, but there are other aging processes, of course, but it is mainly the estrogens that contribute to that sort of lubrication and so on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if we maintain all mucus linings by keeping hydrated, and you know, the omega-7 fat can be useful, the antioxidants, then it doesn't have to be the dried up prune. And there is a lady called Saida Desilets who does jade egg therapy, and so you have these green jade eggs that you use to exercise the vagina and keep tone, and it helps keep lubrication, and it also helps generally the impact is good on the rest of the body as well. So her name is Saida, and the surname is Desilets. And of course, the thing to think about is that often in the menopause and after, some of the things that can happen are things like prolapses, because again of the weakening of the tissue and the muscles in that area, and you know, bladder, rectal, and it's sort of thinking, well, it is a good idea to keep all of that toned, not just from the point of view of, you know, sexual intercourse, but because you don't want it all falling out through, you know, and it helps keep your bladder from becoming incontinent if all of those pelvic floor muscles are toned as well. So, you know, lots of good reasons to exercise that area of our body as well. Yeah.
Food for thought.
Food for thought, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
7 oil again. I couldn't see Booker.
Sea buckthorn, yes.
Buckthorn.
Buckthorn. It's a very bright orange oil from berries. And you can get sea buckthorn oil on jolly old Amazon. I'm sorry, I don't have a supplier who. Now, just a minute. Did Cytoplan start to do strategy? I'll check.
Who?
I was just musing to myself with the Cytoplan had started to do one, and I need to check. Yeah.
Well, I'm enjoying my second childhood. Or whatever teenage year.
Yeah.
But yes, it'll all be good.
Yeah, I mean, it's the menstrual route is useful. I felt quite sad when it stopped, because I thought, damn it, you know, that's an extra route of elimination I've just lost. But at the same time, yes, I mean, it's much more convenient, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other night sweat, sorry, if you wake up in a sweat is different than if you wake up and then begin to sweat. It means a different Right,
Yeah.
which is which? One sugar,
Yes.
second.
So if you wake up sweating, then that means it's hormonal. It's related to female hormones.
All right.
If you wake up and then you sweat, that is your blood sugar. And so also think about, well, if you're waking up and it's between 3 and 5 a.m., it's, you know, quite likely to be blood sugar, because that is your adrenal gland's lowest point, where 4 p.m., 3 to 5 is cortisol peak time, 3 to 5 a.m. is cortisol low time. And so your blood sugar, it could be in its boots, you know, if you're a bit stressed and dehydrated and, you know, or you ate something quite sugary, you know, it could be it will put you at a peak and then you'll really crash deep down. And unfortunately, then between 3 and 5, you might have a bit of a reaction to that.
Right.
That's Greenwich Mean Time, Susie.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. Great. Well, I'm sorry I have to say goodbye, lads, but because I know they've made tea and I've sort of
Yes.
go down
Nice
to
to eat it.
yeah, not that I don't too late, but it'll be fine. But very interesting, and thank you very much yet again, darling.
Thank you. And
Okay.
does everybody mind if I move everything forward to Tuesday? Because I know I haven't
Yes,
checked with
of course.
everybody. Yes,
That's fine.
lovely.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So
Okay.
I'll check in with a little note or text or something for times and make sure that's still all right.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
Oh, is that for the 1-to-1, Susie?
Yeah, that's your one.
Yes, right. Yes, I was thinking. So we won't have clinic on a Monday night.
No, I'm having a night off.
Oh, well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because my son said something about Monday, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll have to miss the clinic. But that's Monday off. Yes, good.
Yeah,
Great.
that's lovely. Thank
Have a
you.
Okay. Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a lovely
you.
Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah, Easter to you all.
Yeah.
Bye.